Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie McGrath, Senior Editor at Forbes, and today we are joined by Randall Lane, Forbes' Chief Content Officer, and he's going to talk about a new Forbes survey that shows declining trust from America's hiring managers in Ivy League institutions. Randall, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Maggie. Thanks for having me.
So this survey is really provocative. It's finding that hiring managers have less trust in the Ivy League than they had even just 5 years ago. What is at play here?
I think we now have numbers that kind of confirm something. I think a lot of people, a lot of hires, have felt anecdotally, which is what is happening. If we want to even take a step back and think about what the Ivy League means, the Ivy League for literally hundreds of years, in Harvard's case, more than 300 years, yeah, more than 300 years, has kind of served as kind of America's meritocracy filter, where it's basically we're going to try to pick the highest achievers. We're going to train them through a really hard regimen so that employers could say, hey, okay, well, you're a Harvard grad, you're a Dartmouth grad, whatever it is. I know what the product I'm getting. And what this survey shows, and just to back up, we've surveyed 300 people, 300 subscribers to our Future of Work, Forbes Future of Work newsletter, but 3/4 of them are make direct hiring decisions. So we focused on that cohort, and we said 5 years ago, more or less likely to hire from the Ivy League. 33% said less likely, only 5% said more likely. So you could say that's an indictment of the entire education system, except when we asked them about public universities, 42% said more likely and only 5% said less likely. That's an incredible, it's almost parallel universes where you see a clear shift, a numeric shift, a real shift from that idea of an Ivy League pedigree. What's going on now is that a lot of employers are saying, I want folks who are smart, hardworking, and maybe are a little hungrier, and a little less, feeling special, quote unquote, which is some of the criticisms we saw in the survey.
Hiring managers said that Ivy League grads are too entitled and feel too special.
Well, we did, and Emma Woodford did such a good job reporting this out. But as she was then talking to that was the anecdotal feedback on the numeric proof that, right now, an Ivy League degree from a hiring perspective is worth less. And again, I think that also explains to some degree some of this. You're seeing what happens, when what's going on campuses across the country, and again, with some of the Ivy campuses being at the center of it, it just creates this idea of what the product, which is the students, are what's being served up to the employers who want to hire them. And again, a lot of this has nothing to do with the students themselves. It's really this entire, we've seen this, and I think what the survey points out is that this has been this trend has been happening for several years, not just this week. Employers are more sour on the Ivies. It's that this has been going on for years.
I was going to say there was a Gallup poll last summer that showed overall public trust in higher ed has been declining. Is this part of that same story, do you think?
I think the dichotomy that when we asked and coming up with this new Ivies list, the idea that when we asked about trust in Ivy League, way down, trust in public universities, way up, trust in non-Ivy universities, up, well up. So it's not, I think the Ivies are kind of a representative of this, a certain kind of, again, I think, you mentioned just the word entitled, the idea of schools that kind of don't, they're in their own kind of bubble. And you're seeing that with these numbers because the trust from hires is mixed. It's down for the super elite Ivies and it's up for great public universities. And in fact, in coming up with our new Ivies list, the idea was, let's look at, they were ranked and chosen based on the feedback from people who were hiring their students. So these are the schools that employers are saying are producing smart, hardworking, the kind of graduates that they want.
This survey has implications for administrators at schools, for kids applying to schools, and for kids currently in schools. Let's start with the administrators. What do you hope that the nation's college administrators take from this survey?
I think what we're seeing, part of our methodology here, you're seeing a walk back. Standardized test scores created a lot of this kind of distrust in some of these graduates. I mean, if you think about, again, look at the Ivy League, what it's supposed to mean, and then what happened when coming out of COVID. A lot of schools did away with mandatory testing, and some systems like the University of California won't even look at it if you do submit it. So that tradition of using as many metrics as possible to get the class that's most likely to see kind of went out the window. What happened was the Ivies, I think, admissions directors at the Ivy League specifically talk about their desire to have a well-rounded class, but that what they meant, and they said this, and this was kind of a very pervasive thought, was that well-rounded class meant people who are exceptional at one thing, and together it's a really well-rounded class. But what we lost out on was well-rounded individuals. And what happened to the kid who's, and it's not enough just to be a valedictorian and have perfect board scores. The board scores go out the window, and there are a lot of kids who have perfect school grades now because of grade inflation. And so what happened when schools did away with standardized tests or mandatory standardized tests was they kind of put an X factor, and actually a lot of kids weren't, it actually disproportionately, the people who were hurt the most were students from underrepresented groups. There was just a big survey that came out with very conclusive proof about that. And the reason is because the universities couldn't tell from somebody from a different background if they could handle the workload. A standardized test is meant to say, yes, this kid is just as smart, probably smarter than the other kids because of what he or she had to overcome. And so in bringing back standardized testing, you saw Dartmouth agreed to do it, then Yale followed, Brown followed. What's happening is you're seeing a return to that. And while, again, there are problems with standardized testing too, taking that away actually did a lot of damage to the representation of the Ivy League.
Now, I was looking at admissions numbers and application numbers for the Ivy League for this past season, and Penn, my alma mater, had 65,000 applicants, yes. and yours.
Yes.
65,000 applicants, all-time high for the school. How do you square that? Other Ivies were down a little bit year over year, but still were reporting their third largest applicant class, second largest applicant class. Kids are still applying to these institutions.
Of course. Listen, these schools, Penn has 275 plus years of brand, but as Warren Buffett, of course, famously said, you can build a reputation over 20 years and it takes 5 minutes to blow it. And maybe for these schools, it's 200 years of reputation, 5 years to blow it. What's happening is, again, with the Common App, it's a lot easier to apply to more schools. And so, you're going to continue to see those trends. There's such a craving for these credential degrees. So, so many of the top schools are up. But if if you're looking at, you could go, this week is the week that students decide. And if you just go look on social media, you see a lot of people who are actually agonizing between schools that used to be an automatic and these new Ivies that we listed, where I think there's a lot of feeling that the degree is also prestigious, but maybe there's a better focus on producing the kind of students who then will excel when they get out of school.
And of course, financial aid is a big consideration. I know I was
right.
weighing those financial aid packages.
For sure. And if you look at these state schools, they're great schools, and they cost half of what the sticker price is on the Ivies. But yes, in a private school, financial aid is everything. And the Ivies also, of course, have very good financial aids with those giant endowments.
Yes, which brings me to my question, which is selfish, but I just finished paying down my student debt from Penn last year, and I'm someone who wants to see the value of my education increase year over year. Yes. So for alumni of these institutions that are falling out of favor with recruiters and in public eye, what should we do? How should we think? What's your message?
I think, again, what's great about and what's different about this survey and different about this ranking of schools is that we're ultimately looking at the people who are, when you graduate, what your diploma is worth is, of course, it's worth what you carry in your head, and it's worth the networks that you make. But ultimately, the number one customer is who then hires out of there. And so, in listening to what these respondents to this survey said, and I'm sure there'll be follow-ups to this, I think schools would do well to understand that when. And again, in every field, in every sector, whether it's hospitals or startups or nonprofits, if the people who are hiring those great jobs, who have the great jobs and are hiring, are happy with your graduates, the value of the degree goes up, and if they're not, it goes down.
You said you're sure there will be a lot of follow-ups. What is your number one follow-up question or trend that you will be looking for in the months to come on the back of this survey?
I think, again, this is a snapshot, and I think it'll be interesting to see, especially with, so much, just what's going on campuses right now. So, I think whether or not this is a snapshot of a time or whether this is something that's more permanent, I think will be very interesting and something we're to keep an eye on.
Excellent. Randall Lane, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.